Can you come around?
Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, good afternoon. We are almost getting ready, everybody. We have about 1 minute before we start, so we'll wait for, here we go. Good afternoon, Durham, North Carolina. We would like to call the Durham City Council work session to order for this, the 18th day of August 2022 at 1 p.m. We certainly want to welcome all of you here in attendance in person today and those joining us remotely as well. Madam Clerk, if you would please call our roll.
Mayor O'Neill.
I am present.
Mayor Pro Tem Middleton has requested an excused absence for today. Councilmember Caballero.
Here.
Councilmember Freeman.
Present.
Councilmember Holsey-Hyman. Present. Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, I open the floor for any announcements by my colleagues. Looking to the left.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to acknowledge once again, it's Black Business Month, and excited to see, the movement and progression toward even more support for our business community. The stronger our Black businesses are, the stronger our overall business community is. And again, as I stated on Monday, it's like jazz, America's music. It became America's music because we all came together to make it that. So that's just an example of what our Black businesses can do for our community, and I just wanted to acknowledge that again. Also, I know there's a lot of talk around the social district stuff, and just to say to the community, it is coming. But we want to make sure we do it right the first time. So it is coming, and we just ask for a little patience. We'd rather you say thank you for getting it right rather than what the heck are you doing. So thank you.
Are there any other announcements? Right. I did want to stress again today that it is Patience and Kindness Month, and I'm cognizant ever more each and every day how much I need to receive it as well as give it. So please be kind and be patient. I do want to echo the sentiments of Councilman Williams in terms of the consideration of a social district in downtown Durham. That matter was brought to me on yesterday. I did get some emails this morning that were wondering why it was not on the agenda today at this day's work session. I was given the proposal on yesterday, so I would not think that would be enough time. Our agenda today was set about 2 weeks ago, and I met with DDI on yesterday. So I would think that in my role as mayor, I would need a little bit more than 24 hours before I make such a decision. We are considering it, and it will come, but there is a due diligence in all of this that we must do. And since it just came before me on yesterday, I have not had time to do that. So I ask for your patience as we do consider it, and we'll get back to you as soon as we're able to address some of the concerns that I have and others have as well. So now we turn to our priority items, and I look to my right to see if our city manager has any priority items for today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the Durham City Council. I do have a few priority items for the work session this afternoon. Agenda item number 15, which is an amendment to contract number 16283, contract amendment number 2 with VHB NC PC. The motion and attachments number 1 and number 4 were updated to change the contract amounts from $40,885 to $98,520, and thus change the contract total from $240,884 to $298,520. Agenda item number 18, 2022 second quarter crime report. A presentation will be made this afternoon, and it will be approximately 20 minutes. Agenda item number 23, Cliff Heindale was a resident scheduled to speak today, and that resident has withdrawn that request. And then finally, agenda item number 24, which is a grant project ordinance for Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act employment training funds for program year 2022, is a supplemental item that has been added for your consideration. That is all I have for today's priority items, and thank you.
Thank you, Manager Page. At this time, you've now heard the manager's priority items. I would like to entertain a motion for their approval.
So moved.
Second.
All right, this has been moved by Councilwoman Freeman, seconded by Councilwoman Javiera. All that we approve the manager's priority items. All in favor, if you would sign by saying A or I. Aye. The opposed have the same right. Hearing none, the ayes have it, and the motion passes unanimously. I'll now turn to our city attorney for any priority items she may have.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the Durham City Council. It's good to see you again. I actually have a request as part of the CAO priority items. You all received a memorandum from me about a week ago indicating that Governor Cooper's declaration of emergency, state of emergency, was lifted effective Monday of this week, August 15th, which removes from local elected boards clear authority to meet remotely. You all have been meeting in person for quite some time. That's not quite an issue. But we also have a number of, we have a couple dozen volunteer boards with the city to which you all appoint members, and many of those boards have been meeting remotely as well. And to assist our office and also the city clerk, who provides a lot of facilitation and administration for those boards, we would love for the council to engage in a brief conversation at the close of the meeting to decide how you want voluntary boards to be meeting. Do you want them to continue to meet remotely? We can probably make that happen in most instances. It may require a little tweaking of bylaws and that sort of thing. We're still doing some research on that front. And then I'll provide some information about quasi-judicial boards, which, like you all, are required to meet in person. But that's my only request. Thank you.
All right. You have now heard our city attorney's priority items, and I am ready to entertain a motion to accept her priority items.
So moved.
Second.
This has been moved by Councilman Williams, seconded by Councilwoman Hyman, I believe. I heard two. To approve the city attorney's priority items. All those in favor, if you would sign by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed have the same right. Hearing none, that motion passes unanimously, and we now turn to our city clerk, and we will reserve that time at the end of the meeting for that discussion.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. The City Clerk's office has no priority items today.
All right, thank you. We will now turn to our agenda, and I will read the entire agenda, but we will first consider the administrative consent items, which will be followed by departmental items, and we will also have presentations today and some public hearing matters. So here we go. The first item on today's administrative consent items are Affordable Housing Implementation Committee appointment. Item 2, Durham City County Environmental Affairs Board appointments. Item 3, the Durham Culture Advisory Board appointment. Number 4, the Durham Planning Commission appointment. 5, Recreation Advisory Committee appointment. 6 is the July 2022 bid report. Item 7, which falls under departmental items, the Board Senate Tenants United recommendations.
We pull that, Madam Mayor, for discussion.
Number 8 will also be pulled, which is prescriptions for repair pilot program. Item 9, I think is also going to be pulled, which is the resolution to designate a portion of Fayetteville Street as the Dr. Doc J, middle initial J Jordan and Carrie Thomas Jordan Highway. Number 10, the grant agreement for operating support and program oversight with Durham Community Land Trust, Inc., DCLT. Item 11, the grant agreement for operating support and program oversight with Habitat for Humanity of Durham, Inc.
Madam Mayor, I don't want to pull number 10 or 11. I just wanted to say that I'm glad they're there.
Thank you. Item 12 is the renewal of a contract with North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts to support the domestic violence cases. Item 13, renewal of contract with North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts to support prosecution for gang reduction. Item 14, the adjustment to taxicab fares. 15, amendment to contract number 16283, contract amendment number 2 with VHB-NCPC. Number 16, the amendment to contract number 17565, supplemental agreement number 3 with WSP USA, Inc. Item 17, amendment number 1 to 2021 lift station improvements, Group A lift stations project, professional engineering services contract. Number 18, it's the 2022 second quarter crime report. And now we turn our attention to our public hearings. Number 19, consolidated annexation 5909 Leesville Road. Number 20, consolidated annexation East Gear Street Residential. Number 21 is a permanent closing of Fontanelle Street. Number 22, permanent closing of a portion of Gilbert Street. Number 23, Mr. Cliff Hindell will not be here today, but we do have another person or two in the audience that would be heard as a citizen matter. Number 24, the Grant Project Ordinance for Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA Employment Training Funds for program year 2022. And that will conclude our agenda. We do have a couple of speakers who have signed up for matters that they would need to come back on Monday. And I just want to note that so in case they are here, they won't wait until we get to those items. That will be items 19 and 20.
Same resident.
It's the same resident. Ms. Standback, if you are here in the audience or on the internet, we will ask that you sign up for those matters to be heard on Monday evening. Of the next Monday evening for the city council meeting. Did I get it right, City Manager? I got it right. Thank you. All right, now we'll go back and see what items we have pulled.
Tuesday. She says Tuesday, September 6th.
Oh, thank you. So it will actually be that Tuesday right after the Labor Day holiday. So that's the 6th of September, correct? All right, let me confirm briefly to make sure I have the correct pulled items. Okay, all right, Madam Manager, I have, and I think we are in agreement that the pool items are items 7, 8, and 9, and presentations, and I believe that's what you have as well, is that correct? Yes. All right, now we will turn to our citizens' matter at this time, and we have 2 citizens who are here today to speak with us. The first will be Mr. Bloom, I believe, followed by Mr. Chavis, and you will each have 3 minutes apiece. Mr. Bloom, if you would state your name and address for us, and you will have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Volker Blum, and I'm a resident of Durham, have been for 9 years. And thank you for giving me, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My topic is, you've all heard from me, my topic is cycling infrastructure, but I'm still here because I wanted to be here in person. I thought it warrants the matter since I'm writing emails, and I'm here on my own, as you can see. We've lived in many places before Durham. We came to Durham, and one of the things that I know many people who come to Durham, but also many here do, is try to bike around to get to work, to get to infrastructure, something like medical appointments, for instance. And this is a small thing. It's solved in many places, and it's easy to solve, but for some reason it's not solved in Durham yet. We've done a lot in the 2010s, but for many places we're not there yet. And so one place that I think you're all aware of is Irvin Road, or at least I hope you're aware, which is a restriping opportunity. This is a major 5-lane road next to a university campus. It has graduate students, postdocs, employees at the hospital. It has people who live there. It's an urban environment in the meantime, not least because the city itself worked on creating density there. That was part of your planning process. Yet it's a concrete band of 5 lanes that has no accommodations for cyclists. This is the place where there would have been a population of cyclists in Durham, if any. I've personally used the bike lane, the sidewalk there, because it's not safe to bike on the road. I've spoken to many people. My family has used the sidewalk there when we had to, for the time that we still didn't have a car. I can't tell you, unfortunately, what a difference it makes to have a car. We had to buy one during the pandemic. That was something we can do, but we didn't necessarily want to. But so we know firsthand how different Durham is if you have a car. It works better, much better. Now, Urban Road was known for 15 years. I asked the city over the 9 years I was here several times what was the status, including this year. And yet, NCDOT has started striping, to my knowledge, recently. And the city public input process was held July 27, 2 weeks before the restriping started. Now, one can say, well, I don't know what to say about that. This seems odd, since a consulting process was started with consultants that were, I think, paid by the city of Durham months earlier. And before that consulting process, that is when public input should have been sought in a matter as important as this. It was not as it was known that this was a road that was unimportant. Yet the public, I think, was not asked. There were meetings held with private stakeholders, but I don't think with the public. And so I think something got lost in that process, and I think that is a city council matter to see exactly what went, how, and why. The other things that I would ask is that city council consider at least passing a resolution that there should have been bike lanes. This was in the MPO, DCHC, so it wasn't unknown that there should have been bike lanes, yet there aren't. Even if NCDOT is the one that doesn't put bike lanes there, the city should state its opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. James Chavis, if you will come forth and state your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes, sir.
Good morning. My name is James Chavis. I stay at 2813 Ash Street, Apartment B. I'm here on a matter that I sent out to you all requesting a townhouse meeting for the Wheels. And then I got an email back from Chief Chadwell, and I think each one of y'all was on that. And I hope you really go back and look at it. But I got a telephone call last night after I canceled it, saying that you need to ask for the Splash Player Core Committee meeting, the last 2 meetings, and you'll find out the truth. So I called Durham, and I asked her to make a request for this before I got here to see could she get it, and she told me no. Well, I got 2 more telephone calls today telling me the same thing. And one person told me that the engineer on the 8th, when they had the meeting this month, had approved for wheels to be able to be opened, that the city of Durham can go and open wheels. Only thing was wrong with it was the kitchen. Now, somebody is lying. I would be, if you read my email, it stated that Chadwell said he was waiting on the engineer report. I got a call on 8th of this month. The Splash and Players Core Committee had a meeting, and they got a report that stated that wheels can be opened right now if the city of Durham will allow it to happen. So I'm asking the city council to please come out to that meeting that I plan on the 30th to give us a complete understanding of that matter. I am going to call that townhouse meeting back again because we, the citizens of Durham, we pay our taxpayers' money, but we see our money going to everybody else, but to the citizens that actually volunteering their time and not asking for 1 penny to be given to their personally or their organization, but to the city of Durham. And we had to go through this hell. This is unfair, and as it said in there, God under nation, one God under nation, individual, and liberty. Where is our liberty? And especially, where is the justice for people like us? Only asking our taxpayer money to be used for the benefit of the city of Durham. Please come to that meeting on August the 30th, 2022, 6 to 8 o'clock, to express all concerns and bring some. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chavis. We will now turn our attention to our pool matters. And we will start with item number 7, which is the Board Senate Tenants United recommendations, and I believe that's been pulled by Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I requested for this item to be added back to our work session for an opportunity for the folks who had joined the small housing subcommittee that met a few months ago to report back to the rest of the council on the discussion that we had and some requests for staff to either implement or do some more research pursuant to the recommendations that they brought to us. It was either early this year or late last year. I believe the last time we had this as a full council was in January of this year, and unfortunately due to some scheduling issues weren't able to have the subcommittee meeting in time to get it on the agenda before our break. So there are some things that may be a little bit dated, but wanted to report back to the council the things that we discussed and get feedback from staff about how to move forward with, we'll get feedback from additional council members, only 4 of us in the meeting, and then also get feedback from staff about the recommendations that we support that were proposed by NIS. So I'm happy to just kind of go through these things one at a time unless someone has comments or wants to give some more broad context or something like that. Just go through it. Okay, great. So the first item that we looked at was a proposal to improve the inspections process to be more accessible to tenants. And there were a number of recommendations that were made by BCTU and then responded to by NIS. The things that our subcommittee supported were to have NIS track after-hours requests to determine if additional capacity is needed. The second piece about reserving funding for an additional inspector in the budget year, I'm not sure we should get an update from staff about what was in the budget that we approved specifically for NIS. And then we supported the recommendations to encourage staff to communicate needs for additional capacity for the budget process and to add a bilingual code enforcement officer. I believe we added the bilingual code enforcement officer, but I'm not sure if we added anyone else. Madam Manager, do you know offhand?
I do not have that in front of me at this very moment. The department or Mr. Chadwell might have that, but I don't have it right now.
Yeah, no worries. So I think the piece of this that's now relevant for more discussion or feedback from staff is to ask NIS to track after-hours requests for 6 months in order to determine whether there's additional capacity that's required in the department, and that if there is, to reserve some funding for hiring additional code enforcement officers. Would welcome any feedback from other council members who weren't at the meeting on that point. Yeah, if anyone has anything to add, or anyone who was in the meeting. Cool. I mean, so if there's a consensus on that, we can move that recommendation forward to staff. Maybe could we do a thumbs up maybe for each of these?
Thumbs up. I think you need to maybe remove your mask, because I think on the other end, she's not. She
Okay.
didn't hear exactly what it was.
I'm a little bit worried about doing that.
I got it. Can you just move in closer there?
Yeah, closer to the microphone, sure. So the request that we would be moving forward to staff would be to request that NIS track their after-hours requests for service for the next 6 months and report back to council so that we can make a determination on whether there's additional capacity needed for inspectors in this year's budget. Yeah.
It's a question. Is it possible that we, I mean, I think as a subcommittee, we came to agreement on these. Is it possible to kind of move them all forward together? Or are we just gonna, I mean, because trying to go through each one of these one by one seems like a lot.
Yeah, so our subcommittee was 4 people, which is a majority of the council. I think my goal in going through them would be to give other council members an opportunity to weigh in who weren't at the meeting. But if we're worried about time, we could certainly just pass all of these to staff. Maybe the folks who weren't at the meeting could weigh in on whether they would like to give feedback on these items.
Thanks. One of the members is not here today, so that's the only thing that, obviously I think we should move everything forward. There was consensus around the 4 of us, but one of the members is a mayor pro tem out of the 3. So I don't know if we just want to say, to follow up with any questions he may have. I just want to highlight that.
And I think, I'm sorry, I think I'm specifically like trying to get staff feedback, because I know we had the conversation, but I needed staff's feedback on the recommendations. And these were the recommendations from the subcommittee. So, I mean, the mayor developed a subcommittee to actually nail down what that proposal would look like, and this is the proposal, and I think we should just go ahead and move forward, that's all.
Yeah, if the folks who weren't part of the subcommittee are comfortable with that, then I think that is fine. There were a couple of items that we didn't have consensus on, which we could discuss now or later. The items that we did have consensus on, we could just ask staff to move forward with implementation. Everything that we had consensus on were recommendations that NIS gave to us, and so we would be then just asking them to implement their recommendations.
So the items that we have consensus on, can you give us a thumbs up on whether you're okay with moving forward with those? Okay, all right.
Cool, so the couple of things that we didn't have consensus on, let me try to look those up. There was one item in the issue around expanding the housing code, where we had a request around, I think it was a request around increasing proactive code enforcement There were a couple, NIS recommended that we, I'm trying to figure out which one this is, B2. I believe this was the section where we were asked to work with the city attorney's office to develop a system to pursue charging non-compliant owners with infractions. And we didn't have consensus on whether we wanted to move forward with that issue.
Councilwoman Caballero.
Thank you. And I think the city attorney's office is increasing a little bit of their role around those infractions. So
Yeah, so we could just ask the city attorney's office to follow up.
I'll follow up.
Okay.
thank you. Sorry, that was
Great.
probably vague and weird, and I apologize.
No worries. Okay, now I'm under expanding minimum housing code, a thing that we didn't have consensus on was around appliances, whether to add to the housing code that property owners must provide working appliances, including a functioning stove and refrigerator. And I'm sorry, we don't require property owners to provide appliances, but the recommendation that NIS made was to modify the housing code to include repair of stoves and refrigerators when they are provided by the owner. And there was disagreement on the subcommittee about whether we wanted to add that to the housing code.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I do support it. Unless you're being savvy and making sure that your lease is reflecting that, there is the standard North Carolina lease does not protect you there. I'm a recent tenant. And so I knew that this was a problem because of my work on council, so I made sure that it was part of my lease, that whatever appliance was in the apartment or in the house would be repaired if broken. But I don't think necessarily all of our residents know to do that. And so I think that it should be protected. We live in the 21st century. I think having a working refrigerator is just, this is not new technology anymore.
Councilwoman Freeman.
Thank you. And I think that the non-consensus was mainly around whether that would just send a message to a landlord to just not include a refrigerator or a stove in a unit, and not thereby raising the rent because folks would have to buy their own stove or refrigerator. And so just trying to figure out whether or not that was the best way to move forward, that was all.
Yeah, I think the other part of this was just capacity for staff. The way I define recommendation is, just providing it for staff to assess within their capacity, and a matter also around the capacity for enforcement. So we don't want to just put something on paper and not be able to make it actually happen. And again, just expounding off the comment of Councilmember Freeman was, bless you. For me, it was rooted in not every tenant is not every tenant is a good tenant, not every landlord is a bad landlord. But if we're thinking about affordability, how do we manage that gray area? If it's, the more things you require, the more the price could be inflated on the tenant. But if you look at it the other way, it's like, if you don't have it, then you're gonna have to pay for it. So there was just more debate or discussion around it, rather, not necessarily debate, and it ended with not being a consensus.
Yeah, so I was in support of adding this to the housing code, so we came down with 2 in support and 2 against. So if we want to move this forward to staff, we would need more folks on the council to weigh in on whether we think this is a good provision.
I have to ask you, can you repeat that again?
Sure. So our subcommittee came down with 2 folks in favor of moving this forward and 2 opposed. And so if we want to move it forward, we need to hear from other members of council as to whether this should move forward or not.
I guess for me, it's always going to be, I'll echo what Councilman Williams said. It's one thing to have it on paper. It's one thing, it's another to have the ability to enforce it. So I would want to hear back from staff, what that looks like for them in terms of capacity to check. If they are comfortable with being able to proceed with the enforcement part of that, then I will be comfortable with moving forward. That would be my only concern, is just capacity to be able to carry it out. So, and I don't know whether they will have the question to be able to answer that part today or not.
Yeah, and I'd just like to also, like, what is the legal ramifications for us being able to do that? Like, is there any legal ramifications that says we can't, we cannot?
So our city attorney's guidance was that we could add this to the housing code. There are a couple of other recommendations in here as well for things to either research adding to the housing code or add to the housing code. So it's not just the refrigerators and stoves that would potentially add to the workload of staff. I think the first proposal asking NIS to track their requests and potentially add more capacity is the attempt to deal with any potential capacity issues that might come as a result of this or anything else that we'd be adding through this process.
And I would just add that it might be worth just taking a look at it again and moving everything else forward, noting that it's not a done deal. I think just realizing, like, I would love to have more information on what's happened in areas where that's been mandated and whether it's created a situation where folks are now having to spend an extra $2,000 for a fridge and a stove because it's not included in their lease.
So I think that's where I was also getting this part of the, this is part of the conversation that is more nuanced. It's just a little too gray, and once we vote on it and make it an ordinance, it becomes law. But if it's loosely made into law, then therefore we expose ourselves. We become a bit more vulnerable. So you move in and you have a rent that's $4,000 because the washing machine is state-of-the-art, higher energy efficient, and it's a $2,000 washing machine. Just little things like that. I mean, being a little extreme, but those are going to be realities once we vote this in. I'm not against it totally. I think this is one area we need to have a little more conversation around because it's a bit more nuanced. And also, I am not the one that want to get caught up in process to where we subside the outcome. We need to make sure folks are having, safe living conditions. But, not everything is just black and white. We get a recommendation from a group, and I am very grateful for that group because they actually are focusing specifically on living conditions of tenants. But we get those recommendations from a small group of people, and ultimately it becomes law for the city. And therefore, I handle that extremely cautiously. This part of the conversation is a lot more nuanced than being black and white. But I do think, based on the conversation of the four of us, and once you all who were not in that subcommittee have a little more time to look into it, I think we're going to get to some sort of expectation that we could say, folks in Durham, when you move into a place, you're going to have X, Y, Z, but also, not, put our tenants exposed to extreme high rents if they're renting, or put our landlords in a really bad position because we're micromanaging their business decision. So I want to get to the point of being able to support this confidently, but as the other night, I want to be methodical and I want to be able to back up, and my support on it.
Our city manager has a couple of comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as this has been an ongoing, I would call it a collaborative process between the community as well as the city attorney's office and administration and NIS department, this, bringing back this report of, I would call it direction to us on things that we should be implementing, and in some cases may have already implemented, and are in progress. Any ordinance changes that we would be making obviously would come back in a different item with the appropriate language, because we have an ordinance, so it would have to be amended. So this would not be the final decision related to the ordinance. Things that we need to do additional research, look at additional how communities maybe or may not be implementing some of these procedures. We would feel like that would be information that you all needed in order to make that final decision anyway. So we take today's report as on the things that you are recommending that we go ahead and incorporate. If it, if it has a budgetary impact or some other impact, then we would have to bring that back in the appropriate forum. If it's just a change in our processes or additional reporting, we would immediately go ahead and implement those things. But this gives us direction, and we can get started after today, as well as bring back additional information on the items that you all probably would like to have a little bit more information on before you decided on an ordinance change.
Thank you. So we can just, we'll just send you that with a lack of consensus as the note, and y'all can get back to us with any research or ideas that you might have. Councilmember Javier and Councilmember Freeman both want to comment.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, this is, the appliances are limited to stoves and refrigerators. I didn't want that out in the public, that we were talking about washing machines or dishwashers, and I think that we're putting the minimum there because of I think where we have at least to have a base standard. And I just wanted to clarify that point, so there's not confusions on which appliances we were talking about.
Noted.
And I just wanted to get clarity, because we weren't talking about a mandate. There was some conversation about how we couldn't mandate them to be in the unit, but we could mandate if it was in the unit before that they would have to keep it in there. So that was where there was a little bit of a difference, because if it was a mandate that we could say, you have to have a fridge and a stove in a unit, that's different than this conversation. This is really like, if you have a fridge and a stove, when you sign your lease, then you have to have it. And what my concern is mainly is that that just pushes folks to just not include a fridge and a stove, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we can table that for future comment by the administration. There were no other items that we failed to reach consensus on, though we did have a couple of questions or items for more research at the bottom, including getting more details on programs that exist, programs that may exist in other cities to help landlords pay for repairs in exchange for affordability agreements. I know that we've done that at least once with a large landlord here in the city, where we paid for a renovation in exchange for a 30-year affordability agreement, but for smaller landlords, I don't believe that we have a program like that, and there may be interesting models in other cities that we could try to use. And then also, just as we were going through the recommendations, we realized that there were a lot of requests for more research, and we're unsure whether the NIS or the city attorney's office had the capacity to do that research, and wanted to get some feedback on whether it might make sense to bring in some research assistance or a timeline on which folks thought that that research could get back to us.
Yes. So one of the things, it is not a secret that we are constantly finding ourselves sort of resource stretched. I just looked, the Neighborhood Improvement Services Department has 8 vacancies right now. That's just a snapshot. But we are constantly trying to recruit to fill all of the vacancies that we have, and we have begun to realize, innovative or creative ways of getting work done without it being a full-time employee. And we are particularly interested in using students and using interns. We have, I would even call it a formal program that has started up with North Carolina Central regarding interns. So we are in that space, and primarily what I hear you asking us is to come where there is research involved, and you're waiting for additional information for us to be able to look at what we have, what we can bring to the table, and let you know how long it would take to actually get that research done so a decision can be made. It probably, as it relates to amending the minimum housing code, we would want to make sure we kind of did that efficiently. So everything that would would be a code amendment, we would want to have the research done so we could amend. As you all know, it's been a while since we actually amended the code, the housing code. So we would be very conscious that we are being efficient, and we would be, transparent as to how long it would take us.
I'll just add, council member, that the city attorney's office it does have the capacity to conduct once the legal issues are clearly defined, we can certainly finish some white papers for you, get you additional guidance and that sort of thing.
Awesome, thank you so much. So I think at this point, we should just refer these recommendations to the administration for follow-up at, a time when y'all think is reasonable. And we will look forward to hearing your thoughts.
And a thumbs up for, I'm sorry. And just for the record, also making sure to include in that research the source of income and the protected class conversation, just making sure it doesn't get left out, that's all. And
Absolutely, council member, we will do that.
got a thumbs up for that action? All right, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Councilwoman Johnson. We now turn to our next pulled item, which is prescriptions for repair pilot program. And we have a number of speakers here. I believe we have some on the internet as well as in the audience. Is that correct? That's for 8. No, that's for 9. All right. I have Ms. Marsha Owen, who is here. Mr. Xavier Kaysen, who's also here. Ms. Brenda James, who's here. And Dr. Henry Rice. And if you would come in that order, and you have 3 minutes apiece. Thank you so much. Yes, that is fine with me. Okay.
Let's see if we can get her to the microphone. I'm sorry you can't see. Can you see her? Thank you. Is that good enough?
Yes.
Can you hear her? Try to give it a go.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. James. I believe they'll bring your hand here, Mike. Thank you so much.
I want to let everybody see.
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda James, and Durham is my home.
Can y'all hear her?
I am 72 years old, and I've lived in Durham the majority of my life. I'm proud to say that I was raised in the iconic Haiti community. I wrote a book called Bull City Survival, and I'm also a survivor of gun violence. I want to speak today on the gun violence and the people that is survivors. And survivors mean that it's everybody's is a survivor, no matter who is killed. And we need to be heard. Survivors need to be heard. I would like to think that we had resources, but I learned that we don't, not even in the court. The case is a case against North Carolina. It's not a case for us. We don't have resources. We don't have services. And we have a unique perspective on how things would get better if we just had a way to get it out to you. We had a way to speak to you and let you know that we will, as we heal, as we are being heard, we are healed. And as with the healing comes this fresh new energy that wants things to get better. If you come from the community of the violence, you know a little bit more maybe than somebody that's maybe sitting out and they're trying to help us, but they don't know exactly what will work for us. If we had something like a committee or something, I was fortunate. When my son was killed in 2007, I was fortunate to be able to be introduced to the Religious Coalition for a Nonviolent Durham. And I think that right now we are in need of something like that. We are in need of being able to get together and being listened to. And that way, I think it would be a positive step for not just us, but the whole community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. James.
Good afternoon, Mayor Neal and council members. I'm Henry Rice. Whoop, I'm sorry. And it's a pleasure to come back and speak with you again. I'm a pediatric surgeon and head of pediatric surgery at Duke University, and I am honored to bring back to you for more discussion a program called Prescriptions for Repair, which, to refresh your minds, is a unique, relatively unique public-private partnership between Duke University, City of Durham, and community partners represented by Marsha Owen, Xavier Carson, and the Community Wellness Task Force to address the needs, as spoken so eloquently just now, to address unmet healing needs of gun survivors in Durham. In response to the helpful feedback from the last council meeting in June, we've had a chance to speak with almost all the council members over the summer and have substantially revised this program. And like any program that goes through discussion, it's stronger and represents the needs of Durham community better. In particular, I want to highlight 3 things, and these are summarized in the proposal before you with a 1-page summary letter. The first is administrative structure. Some very important concerns were raised at the last council meeting about limited capacity of City of Durham and the Community Safety Department to administer the program. And we have modified the program for this 1-year pilot. Duke University will take over the administration of it in partnership with the city so that we'll launch it, get it going, and hopefully be able to build the seeds of an ongoing sustained public-private partnership to address the needs of gun violence survivors. The second major revision is one of budget. Some concerns were raised of inequitable funding, and we've been able to secure additional funding from Duke Health so that Duke will cover just over 50% of the budget, and we're asking a request from the City of Durham for $72,000 to cover the remaining needs of the 1-year pilot program. I just want to speak from our leadership and such. We are thrilled to be an equitable partner and look forward to moving forward to establish in a more sustained fashion. And the third was some very helpful comments about associated research component and ways to engage community representation in this. I want to thank Councilmember Holsley Hyman, who has introduced us to the social work faculty at NC Central, and we have broadened the participation in the research component of this, which is designed to run this as a really high-quality program so that we can not only heal the citizens of Durham in the best capacity, but we can learn lessons. And to this end, we've broadened our scope and our diversity of people of different opinions and trainings and life experiences, and that's going to make for a much more robust program. So I want to thank you for that. And we're happy to entertain questions as well.
Councilwoman Freeman.
Just had one follow-up question. I know you mentioned that Duke would cover 50%. Is that 50% coming into the community safety and wellness, community safety department for the city this year? Or is that just staffing and like in-kind type of support?
No, that's, yeah, just to clarify, so the total budget for the one-year pilot program is $147,000. And this, my time, Marcia, Xavier's time, all of the staff time is voluntary. So that money is to support the staffing needs for the program itself and for the such. And these are direct cash donations. So Duke will cover $75,000 of the $147,000 costs. We're making a request for the city of Durham for the remaining $72,000 to cover the $147,000 budget.
Indirect cash
Indirect cash.
out to the community.
Are you asking if it's going to the
City manager
community
can-
safety department?
Well, just not sitting at Duke the whole time. That's what I'm saying.
Councilwoman Freeman, I believe City Manager Page has an answer for that question.
Yes, the item that is before you today would be a payment to Duke University for our portion of the program.
And that payment to Duke University, so this 72 is going to Duke with the 75.
Yes.
And that 75 is going, all 147,000 is going to end up in our community, is what I'm concerned about.
Correct. Not, yes, if you're asking if any of that monies are going to any other needs other than the program itself, the answer is no.
Yes.
Those are all for the program.
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, we'll start with Councilwoman Hyman and come back to Councilman Williams.
So it's good to see you all again. We have been, and I want to just say thank you for including me in your meetings on the planning and the revitalizations of this proposal. And I am very happy with the improvements. I mean, one of my first concerns that when you brought it before was that I understand that this is a population that needs to be researched and finding out about, survivors of gun violence. But my issue before was re-traumatizing people and not giving them the services that they need. And I'm going to say that with our communications and the meetings that we've had and all what we're putting in place, I feel very comfortable with now the supportive service, the mental health community services that you're going to have in place, with this going on. So I'm so elated of you taking all of the suggestions and putting it into place, and I totally support this now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and colleagues. So I'm going to ask about program quality. So you said all of the funds will go directly back out, but will there not be funds allocated to any operational cost?
So specifically, I refer you to, there's a budget in the proposal that's attached to you. The operational costs would include hiring of a coordinator for this, where all the money would go to that person's salary for those particular costs, as well as compensating facilitators of people who are doing this intervention itself to help direct our citizens to required mental health needs and other supportive structures, as well as compensation for the participants themselves in respect of their time and wisdom and community lessons that we all learn this. That's the salary lines that are part of this.
All right, thank you so much. I want to echo, these are the steps we take to have, good government. Walking in the hallway saying, hey, this might not work today, but we're going to come back, have some discussion about it. It'll come through much better, and we get to a point of yes. Thank you, Duke University, for being a larger partner in this as well. I look forward to assessing the palette as it goes through. And once we get to the end of the palette, I think we'll have to, if the program is successful, we'll have to find a home for it. And I think we probably want to start having that conversation now. It's Duke University, and Madam Manager, correct, shut me up if I need to. But regarding housing this, is this, in the spirit of public-private partnership, is this something that you believe Duke could house? A continuation, or is that something the city has to take on?
I think that's a great program for discussion. I certainly don't want to speak for any partners on there because there are lots of advantages. I think in general, Duke would want to have a sustained public-private partnership, and that can have lots of different structures. It can have lots of different houses, but the intent is to build a long-standing program that supports the needs of gun violence survivors in our community. I think to your point, I think one of the things we're going to learn within a one-year pilot program, of which we're including a program evaluation as well as a output of our findings themselves, is we're going to learn where the best place to house this is. And we're going to learn what our gaps in our existing structures are. And I think we're going to, although it's time intensive to do a one-year pilot, I think we're going to learn something to make a stronger, more sustained program in the end.
Absolutely. Thank you. Lastly, my philosophy has always been, our community's problems are present, but our community's solutions are embedded in the community. I think that's what I'm most excited about this, that we are going to have an opportunity to have, we're going to formalize anecdotal data. It's going to be, qualitative data that is contributable to, I think I just made up a word too, that will contribute to, our overall issue of this gun violence situation and being able to answer the question, why is it happening? So I know I was a little reluctant at first, but I'm now supportive of this work.
I appreciate that.
And I just want to also add too, with this pilot, we're going to also be looking at evidence-based practice, right? And so we can look at evidence-based practice and say what is best, right, in terms of this pilot, in terms of going forward. Like I said, my biggest concern was re-traumatizing, clients, people who have been through this, right? And so you have reorganized it. You've actually added a social work component so that they also might be trained to be able to give the services after you actually do these interviews, which was really a big part for me, because again, we don't want certain populations to be, or just people in general, to be re-traumatized and not get the services that they need after we have started our research pilot, and then we just leave them without any services. That was something that I was not for. And again, I'm gonna state on the record that I appreciate you taking all of the communications, the conversations, the 3 and 4 meetings that we had with NCCU, with myself, and actually coming back with a project that I really think that could give us the evidence-based, just practice that we need to move forward. Because this is something that we need to do. We have too much gun violence and too many people being, and then no services, And so I'm very happy about what you did do in terms of coming back to the table and actually listening and incorporating what we said. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'll reserve my comments until after, but thank you, Dr. Rice. I'm really pleased with what we're seeing.
Honored to come here again.
I'm really pleased with that.
I think just wanted to say thank you.
Yes.
That really, and for your leadership, for coming to us, for bringing us to a better place. And so just thank you for that.
Yep, we just want to address any other concerns that you may have. Other than that, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your leadership.
You all have addressed all of my concerns. I was really pleased, when you're reading all of the documents that we have to read as council folk. It's always good to see a piece that is innovative and that is based in partnership. So the questions that I had on our last meeting together, you all have fully satisfied those questions to me, and I look forward to hearing the reports back. I think this is going to be the start of something really, really unique. It is the start of something really, really unique, and I think it also allows for our community to get some services that have been needed for a long time, and we can kind of quantify that now. So I'm excited about it, and thank you all for all the work that you've put in.
Thank you. I just wanted to very briefly thank the co-chairs of the Community Safety and Wellness Task Force and Dr. Rice for collaborating and bringing this forward, and to all the members of that task force. I know you work very diligently, and I'm very appreciative of everything that you give to Durham. Thank you so much.
Great job. Good one. That's a good one. Thank you so much. All right, and I think all of us are thumbs up on that one, right? Just to make sure. Okay. All right, now we turn to item number 9, which is a resolution to designate a portion of Fayetteville Street as Dr. Doc J. Jordan and Carrie Thompson Jordan Highway, and I believe that we have speakers on the internet, maybe. This one, I believe. Yes. It will be, we'll check and see, Mr. or Ms. Hollinger, Mr. Jersenhorn, Ms. Abel, and Ms. Perkins. We have 4 speakers. And I want to make sure that our clerk has given me a nod. Yes, okay. All right, good afternoon to Ms. Hollinger, Mr. and Ms. Hollinger. You will have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the Durham City Council. I am Delatry Jordan Hollinger, and I am privileged to be the great-grandnephew of Doc Jackson Jordan and Carrie Thomas Jordan. I'd like to thank you for considering this resolution, which would not rename the street, but rather designate a portion of the roadway on which they both lived for a period of about 54 years in their honor. Doc Jordan was for 27 years a professor of history at North Carolina Central University. He was the first professor of history at North Carolina Central University and the only professor of history there for 21 years. He also was well before his time in the area of civil rights. He was a crusader against racial injustice as it relates to African Americans, both in Georgia and in North Carolina. Before he came to North Carolina, he served in various roles, including as president of Edward Waters College and vice president of Morris Brown College, and stood up to Thomas E. Watson, and actually a speech that he gave during a state convention in the 1890s defeated Thomas E. Watson, a white supremacist who was running for governor at that time. In North Carolina, during his time as director of the National Teachers Training School at A&T, he wrote a letter to President Wilson, an open letter that was republished in many Black newspapers and caused the governor of North Carolina at that time, Thomas Bickett, to harass and intimidate African-American higher ed leaders in the state who did not condemn his remarks. I had an opportunity to speak to Mayor Pro Tem Middleton on Tuesday, and he said that the letter from Professor Jordan to President Woodrow Wilson mirrored Frederick Douglass's editorial, "What to the Slave is the 4th of July." And I listened to Mayor Pro Tem Middleton. I went back and read the letter, and I read the Douglass letter. Actually, my uncle named one of his children Frederick Douglass Jordan, who eventually became Bishop Frederick Douglass Jordan, the 72nd elected and consecrated bishop of the AME Church. But their civil rights activism, Carrie Thomas Jordan was the Dean Supervisor for Durham County Public Schools, and she was responsible for building 12 schools for the Black community. She was responsible for starting the first African-American commencement exercises for the Black community. They did this by selling food and baking goods and sending students to North Carolina Central University, where my uncle started the first Black, or what they called at that time, colored summer schools in Durham County. And so these are 2 individuals who served this community valiantly. They were warriors because their work happened so long ago. You know, Doc Jordan was born in 1866. Carrie Jordan in 70. Yes, Madam Mayor.
We thank you for your time today. I hate to have to interrupt, but your time is up, and I try to be cognizant of being equitable, but I did want you to finish your statement, your sentence, rather.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. The statement was simply They were born in the 1860s and the 1870s. Had they been born in the 20s or the 30s, I think they probably would have been two of the most well-known civil rights leaders in the country. But they were born at a time where that was not to happen. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I appreciate the council's consideration.
Thank you so much. We now turn our attention to Mr. Jerry Gershenhorn.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon to the mayor and city council. My name is Jerry Gershenhorn. I taught history for 29 years at North Carolina Central University, and I speak in favor of the resolution supporting the honorary designation of Fayetteville Street from Lawson Street to Timothy Avenue as Dr. Doc J. Jordan and Carrie Thomas Jordan Highway. And my remarks will focus on Doc Jackson Jordan, who you've heard about from Mr. Hollinger. As he mentioned, Jordan was born in 1866 in Cuthbert, Georgia. This was during the Reconstruction era, just 1 year after the passage of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the US. Jordan devoted his life to education, teaching history, and fighting for freedom for African Americans. He was well educated, earning bachelor's and law degrees at Allen University in Columbia, South Carolina, and bachelor's and master's degrees from Columbia University in New York. He ran for the state legislature in Georgia in 1892, but lost. He taught at a number of historically Black colleges. And during that time, as we know, education was supposed to be separate but equal, but it was never equal. And educators like Doc Jackson Jordan were pivotal in providing education for African Americans during that era. He also served as president of Edward Waters College in Jacksonville, Florida, and Kittrell College in North Carolina. He taught at North Carolina A&T, and as you heard, he taught at North Carolina College for 23 years, which is now, of course, NCCU. In 1901, Jordan joined with W.E.B. Du Bois and others to challenge plans by the Georgia State Legislature to close most of the Black public schools in the state. And Dr. Du Bois and Dr. Jordan showed the gross disparities between the resources available to the state's white public schools compared to the pittance given to Black public schools. While teaching at North Carolina A&T, he published a letter in 1917 challenging President Woodrow Wilson's anti-Black policies in the North Carolina Independent, a newspaper published by Black educator Charles Hunter. As president, Wilson resegregated the federal government and fired many Black federal employees. Historian Roger Smith noted that, quote, Wilson became the most ardent champion of segregation of any United States president. 3 months after the US declared war on Germany, leading to the US entering World War I, Jordan wrote in reaction to the East St. Louis race riot, in which white mobs killed dozens of African Americans. And Jordan held President Wilson responsible for the riot, writing, quote, you have uttered many fine sentiments about the rights of humanity and the glories of democracy, but by your acts you have told your fellow countrymen that you do not regard the Negro as human, end quote. The white press demonized Jordan for his letter, and it is likely that Jordan was forced out at A&T because of his outspoken letter in defense of Black freedom and Black lives.
Mr.
Nonetheless,
Gershenhorn,
yes.
your time is now up, sir, but we thank you for your comments today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I turn our attention now to Ms. Joanne Abel, who will be followed by Ms. Jacqueline Perkins, and you will each have 3 minutes apiece.
Oh, Diana's first. Hi, thank you, Madam Mayor and Council for having me here. And I want to direct your attention. I was hoping I could show this to the Durham County Library's web exhibit, The Women Who Ran the Schools. Carrie T. Jordan was one of 7 of the Jean supervising teachers who served African American schools in Durham County from 1915 to 1961. You can learn more about these amazing women that not many people know about. During her time, during Carrie T. Jordan's time as the Jean supervising teachers, Durham County schools were transformed. One of her main accomplishments was the completion of 12 new Rosenwald schools. And the Rosenwald schools were a project where this community had to raise money, then the school board had to agree to take it. So in essence, the African-American community is double taxed. And I want to just read you a quote from one of Ms. Jordan's reports. She talked about how she organized communities to raise the funds to qualify for these grants. Quote, "Of course, it has meant much hard work and many community meetings on weekends, evenings, with quite a few educational rallies held on Sundays. In the school year," end quote, "in the school year of 1923 to 1924, she used these fundraising meetings and rallies to improve attendance and raise money. That year, she reported the community contributed $1,500, which would be about $19,000 in today's money. As mentioned before, she started county commencements where African-American students celebrated their achievements. These were printed in the Durham Herald, which almost printed nothing positive about African-Americans. Dr. Vanderbilt Littlefield wrote, these county commencements were a public voice for making moral and political claims on the rest of society, showing off the achievements of African-American students. Ms. Jordan worked with the health department, worked to raise teacher qualifications, planned summer schools so teachers could improve their skills. She organized 100% of all the teachers in the county to join the North Carolina Teachers Association and actually won a prize of money of $100 to improve libraries in the schools. She embodied the Jean's Teachers motto of doing the next needed thing. Thank you. And I support the naming the road for Dr. Doc and Ms. Carrie T. Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We now turn our attention to Ms. Jacqueline Perkins. Ms. Perkins?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can now. You will have 3 minutes.
Okay, and thank you, and I promise not to go over my time. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of you for affording us the opportunity to speak to you today on a matter pertaining to two remarkable civil rights pioneers. I call them American heroes, whose life's work was historic, impactful, and transformational, not only within the city of Durham, but within the state of North Carolina and the United States. Professor Doc Jackson Jordan, the son of a former slave, and his wife, Jean Supervisor, Ms. Carrie Thomas Jordan, the daughter of a minister and one of the founders of an HBCU in Atlanta, Morris Brown College. Without question, they were committed to political advocacy, social justice, civil rights, and service to mankind. Their body of work is a testament to their extraordinary life and legacy. At a time when Blacks could be hung, lynched, killed, thrown in jail for even addressing or looking in the eyes of a white person, these people were working and advocating for change. They understood that education was the key to empowerment, education and advocacy. To imagine a Black man in 1917, and I'm going to skip a little bit on the some of their accomplishments because those have been discussed and they're too numerous to discuss in 3 minutes or even 3 days. But they understood that they had to be bold, they had to be courageous, and they had to stand up for what they believed in. And to know that, again, a Black man in 1917 to write a letter to a sitting president, he could have been dead the next day, but he was courageous enough to do it. He was fearless, and his wife was fearless in that she decided that she was not going to adhere to the standards of the curriculum that was set forth for Black youth, yet she would change that to mirror or to reflect the curriculum that was established for white students. And rather than teaching them how to cook and sew and prepare meals or farm. She said, no, we're going to learn to read. We're going to learn mathematics. And of course, that changed the trajectory of the lives of African Americans all over the nation. And as I close, I just want to say that, we must do this for the people of the United States and in Durham, especially our young people, so that when they pass by that street, they'll say, who was Doc Jackson Jordan, and Carrie Thomas Jordan? And perhaps they'll have an opportunity to go and look and see who they were and what they did and how impactful their work was. I wish that I could continue, but you heard from us, and we ask that you support this designation, the street designation in their honor. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Perkins, for coming to share with us today. We will now turn our attention to item 18, which is our 2022 second quarter crime report. And we'd ask our chief to come forth. And we say, hello, everybody, all the men and women in white over there today, in blue, some in blue. Glad to have you all with us today. Thank you so much for the work that you do. Those are members of the Durham Police Department that I'm speaking to, everybody in internet land. Welcome, Chief.
Good afternoon. Get started in just a second. All right, now that we've gotten that done, I want to say good afternoon and thank you, Madam Mayor, City of Durham Council, Manager Page, and all of our City of Durham staff that are here, as well as my staff and our community. So thank you for today. Here I am back in front of you one more time. Today I want to take a moment and present to you the 2022 second quarter report. And as you know, it does cover our 5 performance measures. Part 1, violent crime, Part 1, property crime, our clearance rates, response times to priority 1 calls, and staffing levels. So our Part 1, violent crime, and I have to pause and say what I'm going to say is certainly not in any way to diminish the tragedy that we had yesterday. So I do want to recognize and certainly send all of our condolences and prayers to the family of the young man yesterday that was killed, but also to that community. Having said that, the overall violent crime rate is down 6% this quarter, compared to 2021, quarter 2. One of the notable decreases in our violent crime can be found with the aggravated assaults. That was down 19%. And so that's significant, significant reduction. And then also, while we note our decrease, we also need to note the increase to 32%. So we went down in one category, but then went up in another. So I want to just kind of drill down a little bit more and touch on some of the specific parts within our violent crime. So if you'll look at our homicide numbers for second quarter 2022 compared to 2021, that does remain unchanged. And then during that time and through to date, the clearance rate for our homicide for this quarter, second quarter, was 30.43%. So if you recall, when I came to you first quarter, the clearance rate, we had only cleared 1 homicide, and I had no doubt in my mind that we would be clearing more because that's who the Durham Police Department, that's who we are. And so we were able to clear more, and from that point, we made further clearances year to date. So currently, we have 16 open cases, and those have 19 victims. As you know, 3 of our cases from 2021 we did clear this year, which is good. What that says to all of the family members of our victims and our community is that while we might not be able to close a case immediately, we are always investigating every one of our cases, homicides and across the board. Our rape is down 9%, and so that's one of our reductions. We had 70 reported offenses, with 18 of those, that's 26%, having occurred in previous years. And this is not anything new. Oftentimes, rapes, sexual assaults are reported and they're belated. What matters most to us is that they're reported. We did have 9 cases that were unfounded, and 4 of those having been reported in prior years. 49 actual cases were reported and occurred this year, but they have not been unfounded. They are still being investigated. So let's move forward to our robbery. We did see several significant robbery series where we had a group of individuals that would commit several robberies within this second quarter time period. 35% of the total robberies in quarter 2 were from persons, and 19% were commercial. So our robberies did experience an increase. We made some very good arrests, some significant arrests of those individuals that were responsible. What I do want to note, though, is that firearms were used in about 59% of these cases. So everywhere it's firearms, firearms, firearms. So we recognize that it really is a common weapon that's being used. So our aggravated assaults, our staff has done a tremendous job collectively in working to help bring a reduction to our aggravated assaults. No one team can take credit, although I'm sure that there are a couple that would like to. 24%, and I want to note, of those aggravated assaults were domestic, and that also includes some of our shooting incidents, so we'll kind of talk about that in just a little bit. All right, so this is year to date, what you have in front of you. It's year to date through June the 30th. It's a comparison of 2021 second quarter and 2022 second quarter. So one of the things that, if you'll notice, is that there was a 3% reduction in our actual shooting incidents. And that kind of goes along, if you'll see, we did have an increase, a slight increase in our person shot. So while we had a decrease in one category, we had an increase in another. So I do want to just take note, we had several incidents where we had multiple victims. And we're starting to see that more, to the point that it made up 35% of the overall aggravated assaults in the second quarter. 35%, or about 204. So that's a significant number as we start to look at how serious our shootings are becoming. One person being shot, very serious. Multiple people, very concerning and extremely serious. So I do want to talk and touch on a little bit about the CAT team, and I'm going to do that in later slides. As you know, I kind of promised you that whenever we started the CAT team. So property crime, we can't forget about our property crime. Most often we talk most about violent crime, but property crime is very important. So we saw decreases, overall change between 2021 and 2022 in all of the categories, except one, and that was motor vehicle theft. So burglary is down 21%. 21%. 63% of those burglaries were to residences, and out of the overall 559 actual offenses. Our commercial burglaries, they did come down, which is good. They were down about 65%. So I don't know that there's a rhyme or reason, so if you were to ask me what is the trend, why is this happening, there's not really a rhyme or reason to what we're starting to see. What I would say, and what I want to do is give credit to not just the work that the staff is doing, getting out and educating and making these arrests and getting some of these folks that are committing these series off of the street, but I would also say that our community is listening. I think, we need to definitely give, props to our community because they are listening. So let's look at larceny. Our larceny is down 4%. So at the end of the second quarter, we had about 3,285 actual larceny offenses, and that made up 3/4 or 78% or so of all of our reported Part 1 property crime. Larcenies, as you know, include shoplifting. So those are very, very common. 1,300, just over 1,300 of those were motor vehicles. So we're talking about the vehicle break-in, so larceny from motor vehicles. And I always talk about firearms that were taken out of cars. And so 54% of all stolen guns came from this category, 54%. And then a vehicle was left unlocked in 65% of these cases. So we're still having firearms being left in vehicles, whether they're locked or unlocked. 371 of our larcenies were thefts from buildings, and so that's up. So if we talk about our construction sites, sheds, things like that, that's what we're talking about. And then obviously motor vehicle theft is up for us 10%. One thing that we have noticed is that stolen motor vehicles we've seen are being utilized in some of the violent crimes, the shootings. We're seeing an increase in that, and that is just about opportunity. So these vehicles are being used and then they're dumped. And then they're getting another car, stealing another vehicle and using it. Honda Accords and Nissan Altimas were the most two commonly stolen vehicles, and we'll probably just understand that unless that changes from this point forward, that's your most commonly stolen vehicle. Clearance rates. So this is a moment, I'm always bragging about our team, but this is a moment where I'm able to show you the numbers. So again, as you know, we compare in our clearance rates according to the FBI for departments our size, also community our size. So that would be 250,000 to 499,999. So for our 2022 second quarter clearance rates, they were higher than the 2021 Durham Police Department clearances in rape, burglary, and motor vehicle theft. But if you look, the FBI 2020, and you know that FBI always reports about a year or so behind, that'll show you how we're comparing 2021 to 2020, but also our second quarter, where are we at with our clearance rates. Of all of the total violent crime cases that were cleared through the second quarter of the calendar year, 84% of those, and this is a significant number, 84% of those were cleared with an arrest. So that means there was enough probable cause to obtain and secure a warrant for someone's arrest in these cases. We're not talking about ex-clearing, we're not talking about declining to, we are talking about a hands-on in-custody arrest. So I will say that our most common exceptions, ex-cleared, are that of one, either our victims are unwilling to cooperate, which is understandable. And then two, the prosecution of the case was declined by the district attorney's office. And that generally will come about if there's just maybe not enough information. There's not enough there for our district attorney's office to be able to prosecute, and that happens. For property crimes, 88% of the clearances were cleared by arrest. So we are seeing our crimes in some categories increase, but we are also seeing some substantial clearances by arrest in both categories, both Part 1 and Part 2, violent and property crimes, and our staff should be commended for that. Let me go back one and just mention, I did want to, and this is not in your packet, but through August 13th, we're having right now a 58.33% clearance rate for homicides. And those are arrests. All right, let's take a look at our priority 1 calls for service. So it's important that we look at, where are we trending as it relates to calls for service? And I've heard, does staffing play a factor in that? Does geographic location, how big our beats are getting? All of that plays a factor in response to calls for service. So understand when we're looking at this, it's the response time. So once communications dispatches an officer to a call, it's once they are dispatched to once that first officer arrives on scene, that's the time we're looking at. So we had 4,148 priority 1 calls. So think those calls that are emergency. Most of the time it's some sort of emergency response. And year to date for the second quarter, they were up 10% from same quarter 2021. So we are seeing an increase in calls. So our average response time for those priority 1 calls was 6 minutes and 20 seconds. And obviously it did not meet our target of 5 minutes and 48 seconds. So we consistently try to meet or beat that target. We answered 50.9% of those priority 1 calls, though, in less than 5 minutes. And so while we'd like to see that higher, that certainly we are still answering those calls, and we're getting to those calls as quickly as we can. And then we answered in less than 5 minutes our target. 57% of those were answered in less than our target. So this is a new slide. You'll start to see in our quarterly reports, we want to mix it up a little bit and provide you with information that is relative to the conversation, which I think is very, very important when providing information to you all as well as to our community. So this graph that we're looking at provides the average response time. So this is 2022 year to date. And this is to priority P calls or priority 1 calls for service. And it does do a comparison relating to our staffing levels. So this is the true snapshot of how staffing levels can impact response times. So on our horizontal axis, you'll see that this is staffing levels, and on our vertical, it's the actual times. This does include the additional units, the additional personnel that's either working paid shifts or through supplemental staffing initiatives. So that's the initiative that was put into place in January, coupled with our regular paid staffing. So for example, if you'll see on your chart, the 52%, so that's going to be far to your left. Staffing was at 52%, so that was our lowest point during the period. The average response time to that priority call, and I don't know what the call specifically was, it was 8 minutes and 13 seconds. And then when the patrol staffing was 98%, so we did have one day where the patrol staffing was 98%, they were in heaven, that response time was 5 minutes and 30 seconds. So you can see what even an extra 50% will do for staffing. So this provides us a baseline of knowing where are we at and where do we need to be. So there's other factors that do affect response time. So that's call volume, what type of day, what time of day, our road networks, what's happening when that call was dispatched. So the data does suggest to all of us when we're looking that about 6.3% of the variance in between response time to emergency calls, it can be explained by patrol staffing levels. And so we are going to really be tracking this actively and providing this information as we continue our discussion about recruiting and retention. So that's a great segue into staffing for the end of the second quarter 2022, June the 30th. So sworn staffing, we're at 81%, so you'll see our authorized positions and then our actual. And then you'll see our non-sworn, so we can't forget, we won't forget about our non-sworn staff. You'll see our authorized and our actual. So we were currently, now, so I do want to fast forward to currently, we're at 79% staffed. So today, we're 79% staffed. That means about 21% of our positions are vacant. And our non-sworn, we're 83% staffed, and 17% of our positions are vacant. So we just graduated 9 recruits from our basic law enforcement training academy, number 55. So they just graduated, and we have got some great recruits. Our prior BLET, our basic law enforcement recruits, 54, they graduated earlier this year. And so they are still in field patrol training phase, and they should be released on their own shortly. So the department has been focused on implementing innovative recruiting and retention methods, which is extremely important. The raises for our officers is a large part of that. Including the pay for the recruits. So that helped us really bring in some officers that had actually left the department and came back to join our department. And as you know, that allows us to get them back on the street because they're not gone from us too long. So we're able to get them out. We have seen an increase in our sworn applicant testing pool. And I will give a lot of kudos to our recruiting team who has just really expanded their recruiting efforts. We are going to places that I've never even heard of in the state of North Carolina, and actually recruiting out of basic law enforcement training classes at the community colleges. So essentially going to get them before they've even accepted a job offer from any other municipality, and bringing them here to Durham. In addition, we've also kind of stretched out in looking at other recruiting events. So for example, we do have our recruiting staff that are going to be recruiting at John Jay College in New York. As well as going to take a trip to Paris Island. And we are really tapping into our veterans in our department to help us recruit. And as you know, we have the 30 by 30 initiative, the campaign. It's huge, still getting a lot of social media traction, as well as, we are seeing more interest with female recruit candidates. One thing that I don't want to forget about, we did form the partnership with the Army Pays program, and that is a youth program, and it's a strategic partnership with the U.S. Army and the police department, and it's a nationwide partnership, so we're not the only department that participates in it. And it guarantees military personnel and their spouses an interview and possible employment after processing out of the military. So that goes hand in hand with some of the transitional recruiting that we've been doing at many of our military installations. So our ambassador recruiting program is huge. Who best can recruit for your agency but your own officers? So reinstating that program is one of the things that we have put into place. So there's a lot more that we are doing, and we can't forget about our retention efforts. And so we have done a lot of things internally. I call that low-hanging fruit to retain our staff, including allowing them, and you've heard me say this several times, to be more a part of the process, having a seat at the table, and really just engaging with them on a totally different level. So the next slide talks about our staff departures. So this is a new slide for you, council, that will start to be a permanent part of this presentation. So we want you to see what does it look like as far as how are we losing officers, when are we losing them, what are we losing them to? So this is January to June, and as you see, our resignations, we had 24 resignations. So we are trying to prepare ourselves for officers that are, I call them the single-digit academies. So those of us that have graduated from academy, 6 and 7, 8, I went through 9, we're starting to prepare to retire. And we have to really be able to anticipate that. So staff is doing some long-range planning. We are proactively looking at how many retirees we have coming up and working to make sure that we are trying to fill that spot with folks coming into the academy. Resignations 24, retirements 23, and we had a termination. All right, applicant testing. We want to make sure that we are reflecting the community that we serve, and this just provides you with a breakdown of our applicant testing that the Durham Police Department had during the through the second quarter. And what I do want to note is that when applicants come to test, they do a physical portion, so that's the physical test portion, and then they do a written test. What we're seeing is very few applicants are failing the physical portion. We've done some adjustments to what we're asking of our candidates when they come in to perform. Many of them physical an assessment that they've never ever had to do before. So we've adjusted that a bit. Our written test, we are providing examples of what they can anticipate when they come in to take the test. So you wouldn't think that the written test would fail out as many candidates as it has, but it is a standardized test. It is something that is required by the state of North Carolina to enter basic law enforcement training. U visas. So this is a statistic that will remain within our presentation. So our U visas per quarter. So we did receive 87 U visa requests through our second quarter 2022. 68% of those, so 59 out of the 87, were approved. And again, the things that we're doing is sharing that information, is making sure that many of the attorneys that are sending these U visa requests, that they understand and know what the guidelines are, so they're just not sending requests that potentially they know may not meet the threshold. This is the most U visa requests that we have processed in this quarter compared to the last 4 years. And we do not have a backlog. We work very quickly to make sure that we are processing those requests as quickly as we can and providing feedback. So crime area target team. So as you know, this was a temporary unit that we stood up at the height of some of the violent crime incidents that we were seeing involving guns. It started in April, and it is still running now. But so first quarter, these are the first quarter statistics. And again, I would say that this team is an 8-person team, and that includes the supervisors on the team. And so during the 3 months the first 3 months, this is the work that they were able to do. So it shows that they are committed to the effort, but most importantly, it also shows that we have a lot of work to do in this community. So some of the things I do want to show you and point out to you is that the number of firearms seized, 64 firearms were seized from April to June. This unit conducted 461 traffic stops, and were able to process 75 firearms-related charges. So I do want to also point out that many of the individuals that had been arrested on gun-related charges have already been adopted by our federal agencies. And this is just some representation of, and this is just a handful of, well, this is just a small sampling of the pictures that we have. But quite frankly, this is on the scale of mild, what we were seeing as far as firearms. This is mild. We have seen a lot of high-powered rifles, mostly high-powered rifles being seized that were being carried in cars. And so with that, I will close out my presentation, but I'll remind you to follow us if you are not already on all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and the Twitter, as I always say. And I am happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for that presentation. I will open it now to my colleagues for any questions or comments to our chief.
Hi, Chief. How are you? Good to see you.
Yes,
I just have a question. You said you had I think it was 13 refusal to stop. I'm just I want to they're not stopping because they don't have a license. They're not stopping because they may have drugs in their car. What is the?
Yes, so that essentially is when an officer initiates a traffic stop and the car refuses to stop. We don't pursue them unless it's for a violent offense and falls within our policy. It could be for any number of reasons, and it could be as minor as not having a driver's license.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Williams.
Hello, Chief.
Hello, how are you?
And fellow heroes. First, I want to start out with I witnessed today, and I know this is the Community Safety Department, but it was in conjunction with the Durham Police Department. There was someone who was experiencing an issue today in the park across the street. And to see their work in action and in collaboration, it really, really, really made me feel good. You know, the officer was standing back, accompanying them, but standing back at a good distance and allowing the HEART team to do what they needed to do. And if situations are being handled like that and the resources provided for that resident that needed some assistance, we are well on our way to a really good space. And I was riding on a scooter and just stopped. It was like, wow, this is how it works. Yeah. So kudos to you, your team, and the Community Safety Department Director Smith. I wanted to ask about I noticed that in the data around the failed written test,
yes,
there is a significant amount of African-American males that are failing the written test, and I can't help but correlate that with what's happening in our schools. Is there any options for preliminary preparation? And I know the police written assessment is not easy.
Right. Yes. Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. So yes, so staff does provide preparation in advance. You know, we've had some conversations about doing almost a boot camp that will provide some in-person preparation, because right now what we're doing is we're actually sending these preparation documents to them. Well, I don't always look at everything that I'm sent, and I'm just going to be very honest about that. And I can't imagine that you know, our candidates are doing that either. And so, you know, that's something that we are actually looking at doing as a staff is doing this kind of preparation boot camp.
Thank you.
Yes.
Also, in regards of the retirements and the resignations, retirement is understood, but resignation, is there any data qualitatively that we're getting out of the resignations?
Yes, so our recent resignations, we've had one officer that has left for another agency just across the way in Wake County. And when we asked that officer, it was take-home car and just pay.
Yeah.
So that's, we have been tracking that, and so what I will do is make sure that we're providing that in our response. I will also provide that as well. But that's the first officer in a little while that we've had that we've left to go to another agency.
Yeah, and just putting it on the record, we understand that the housing market is causing an additional tax, to have to drive to Durham because they can't afford to live here. So I hope that, as we are addressing other issues, we can get to the point of addressing that. And I found of interest the CAT team. You said it's a staff team of 8?
Correct.
Okay. And they've been quite impactful with just 8 people. I'm not going to go down the lane of, let's produce a whole bunch of CAT teams. The idea is not to have to need them, but this is an area of interest that it seems that it's just 8 people. They've done quite a bit. And we do have real problems on our streets. But I just wanted to say that I will be watching that a lot more. It seems that may be a model that is working.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions for our chief? Councilwoman Caballero.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chief. Good to see you. I just wanted to say thank you for the report and the slides, the additional information. That's always really helpful. And then I said it before, you can see the impact of guns in our community. Not that the crime wouldn't be there, but the impact of what those guns are doing is quite frankly terrifying. We need to. I know it's beyond the scope of this body, because if we could do it, we would have done it. But this is, I will keep saying it, we need gun reform, and we need it. We're seeing just the brutalization of our communities. The slides that show the stolen guns, guns are much more advanced than they used to be. The damage that it causes, we just heard from folks here who are going to be helping us understand better what our victims are going through. But I call on our General Assembly members and our delegation to keep fighting for gun reform in the state of North Carolina.
Anyone else?
And just another, I know you guys get beat up a lot. There was a recent news report that came out, response time is getting worse. And we see the data of, why it's getting worse, and also we see it getting better as well. Thank you for that. But I want to highlight, because I don't know if this will be reported, but yesterday was the first homicide that we've had in over a month, or a first shooting, or a first homicide, or something like that. The streets are I'm not going to say they're getting quieter, but we need to name when things are happening that are not as negative as what we've been used to. So great job to you and the team as well, and I hope that that's reported.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. I too want to make a couple of comments. The job that you have is a very, very difficult job, and those that work for you and for us. And so I always feel compelled when I see them anywhere to stop and tell them thanks. Not everybody can pick up a weapon and put their lives on the line in the protection of a community. So first of all, I have to say thank you. Keeping in mind that we did lose a young person in Durham on yesterday, before that, I know a lot of us have been marking the days that we've gone without. And so yesterday was a sad day, and I offer sincere condolences to the families of the victim and also that community in Durham at large. But to hear that we are getting better, I hope that the community has paid attention to some of the stats and some of the things that you said. One is that the community is listening, and that is we're recognizing that it takes more than the police to intervene in this area. And when you look at the community referrals to the CAT team, I want to particularly highlight that slide where those numbers are increasing, which means that the level of interaction and trust with each other is being built. So I appreciate all of the efforts that team in particular and just Durham Police Department at large has done in this area. So I too, because I normally get a call or a text every time something bad happens in Durham. Interestingly enough, I did not get any calls or texts about the fact that the streets had been silent for 1 month. So we hope that people will be willing to report the good, and we see some good, and we hope that it lasts. I also, though, want to recognize and take a moment to remember the Wake County Deputy Byrd who lost his life in the line of duty. And I would just close this public hearing part with a moment of silence for him. Thank you all. Thank you all for the job that you do. Be safe, be well, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Back to the commissions, right?
To Diana's.
All right. Turn our attention now to our clerk, our city clerk, for her presentations involving boards and commissions and task force.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The following summary are council's nominations to boards, committees, commissions, and task forces. The first is the Affordable Housing Implementation Committee appointment. The selection is Prince R. Rivers. The Durham City County Environmental Affairs Board appointments, there are two. The at-large appointment nomination had no consensus. And would you like to hear the breakdown?
Ma'am, that was what one? Which one? I'm sorry.
It was the EAB at-large appointment. It's Brandon P. Davis with 2 votes, Cooper T. Norris with 3, and Janice Starr with 2. And I can refresh your memories if you need.
All right. We had 2, 2, and 3.
Williams and Middleton selected Davis, Freeman, O'Neill, Halsey, Hyman, Norris, and Caballero and Johnson for Starr.
Say it on the mic.
You can adjust mine to
Cooper Norris?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The EAB selection for the youth seat is Amira and Bima. The Durham Cultural Advisory Board appointment, Jose G. Medrano. Durham Planning Commission appointment, Kimberly V. Williams. And then the final one, Recreation Advisory Commission appointment for the category of person with disability is Marcel Sherlock Jones. Sherlock. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much. All right, I believe that we're now at the point of talking with Attorney Rayburn about the issue she brought forth earlier. So I'll turn it back over to you, Attorney Rayburn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as I stated at the beginning of the meeting, the governor's order that allowed public bodies to essentially conduct remote meetings has been lifted. There is, as I explained in a prior communication to you all, there are statutory quorum and physical presence requirements for elected officials and elected boards. Those statutory requirements don't necessarily apply to appointed boards. The clerk would have to inform you all exactly how many appointed boards we have. I believe it's north of 29. Many of them have been meeting remotely, as you all were for a period of time. Many of them enjoy meeting remotely. I think it makes attendance for appointed members a little easier. It makes access for some members of the public a little easier, and they would like to continue that trend. Our office has looked at the issue. We think generally that is fine, but it's a decision for the city council, how you all want your appointed boards to meet and conduct business on behalf of the city. And so the clerk and I have had some discussion about this, and we just wanted to bring it to the council for some discussion and to get some guidance from you all. As I mentioned earlier, we may have to tweak. We're going to need to go through the various board policies and procedures. Councilmember Caballero mentioned earlier in the day, we need to do some standardization anyway. Certainly we'll be able to standardize this aspect of their meeting, making sure that we indicate in their policies, procedures, bylaws that they can establish a quorum by remote participation, that sort of thing. But just wanted to get some direction from the council, how you all are feeling, answer any questions you may have about particular boards and continued remote participation. And as I indicated also, we would recommend that the Board of Adjustment, the Historic Preservation Commission, potentially the Planning Commission for some meetings, meet in person, but in any other boards that are conducting a quasi-judicial type of procedure, we would recommend that those be in person, but to the extent that they're not, we think it's perfectly appropriate if at the council's pleasure they would like them to meet remotely, that's fine.
Thank you, Attorney Rayberg, and I'm going to open it up for comments, but I do have one question for you, and that is the hybrid format that we sometimes use. Would that still be an option? My concern about mandating whether people appear in person is, one, we're still dealing with COVID, and we still have had some sickness in our body, and that flexibility allows for that to continue if you're able to do it in the hybrid fashion. And secondly, like you said, all of our task force are volunteers from our community, so there's a question of convenience. I do think that we get better attendance rates when they are able to have that flexibility, but I didn't know whether there is still the flexibility to allow the continuation of what we have enjoyed in some instances where some of our members have been ill, and we've had to kind of adjust it to allow for that, for some of us to be in person, some of us to be able to access us via Zoom. So is that a possibility? Is it still, or does it have to be the black and white? Either you appear in person or either you appear remotely?
So, Madam Mayor, the consensus around the state among legal advisors for elected officials and boards is that there are statutory requirements that there be physical presence for a city council to establish a quorum, for you to take a vote. The provisions that allowed you to do that via remote meetings were established during the pandemic. You may recall in session law, I think it was 2020-3, and that remote meeting statute that we were operating under for so long is only operable where there is a legislatively declared state of emergency or a gubernatorial state of emergency. Governor Cooper has lifted that order. So there is no clear authority. We're kind of now back where we were very early in the pandemic. Those who were on council remember I was sending memos kind of searching for some authorization for us to do what we were doing. But, and I think in a case of clear emergency, clear crisis, in a lawsuit, the equities being what they are, we were probably going to come out on top, even not complying with actual public meetings requirements. The legislature made it very clear when they amended this law, the remote meetings participation law, that once there's no state of emergency in force, boards are to be back in person. That is what compliance with the public meetings law requires. What I have said to the clerk is, to the extent, council is trying to confer for something that does not require a quorum or does not require a vote, sure, could you have a meeting that way as long as you make it available to the public virtually as we have been? Yes, but in instances where you are voting, where you need a quorum to hold the meeting, as you do with regular work sessions, regular meetings, the advice from our office is that we continue to meet in person. And so if someone is ill, not able to attend, they should request an excused absence rather than, there really was never a hybrid meeting. That was not how the statute worked. It was either remote or it wasn't. And if one member was participating virtually, that converted the whole meeting to a remote meeting. That remote meetings provision is gone.
All right, I think we are all clear on the status of the law, and I'll open it up for comments from my colleagues. Councilwoman Johnson first, I think.
Thank you. So it seems like the main question before us is whether to allow our boards and commissions to continue to meet virtually, which I would like to do but my concern is that there may be, that the boards that have like specific legal or statutory requirements, like the Planning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, those kinds of boards, that we need different rules. So if we're going to do a big bylaws change, that we should separate out those boards that have more specific requirements. But the vast majority of the boards that are created by us, advisory to the council, don't have any role in state law or formal city policy. I think we can allow them to continue to meet virtually, and that would both be a useful public health measure as well as an accessibility measure for folks who have been, I think that a lot of the meetings have actually been better attended as people have gotten used to. In the beginning, it was hard because people didn't have the technology or the knowledge of remote meetings, but I think now it's a lot easier for folks to go to a remote meeting than go to an in-person meeting, and continuing to have that option, I think is important for our volunteers. I wouldn't want to suddenly make people start coming into City Hall, both for practical reasons as well as, we're still in a pandemic, despite the fact that, the CDC wants to pretend that it's fine to just like cough on people 5 days after you test positive. I would like us to continue to be pretty cautious with how we move forward with COVID. Thanks.
Councilman Williams or Hyman?
Yes, I also agree. I think that there has been better attendance with the virtual meetings. And again, people have a lot of things that they're doing. So they're multitasking, and if they are, still want to be active and involved on our boards, I really think we should be able to give them that flexibility and have the virtual component. Thank you.
Councilman Williams?
Jillian was reading my notes and said exactly what I was going to say, so she said it.
Councilwoman Camille?
Unless there's a board or commission specifically requesting to be able to meet in person, like I know that there's some, but my understanding is I think everybody is very happy to be at, between childcare, meal prep, cost of gas, I can name so many things besides just the public health component. And what I've also seen is that they are creating their own opportunities to meet in person for socializing or retreat or whatever, so that they get to know each other better. So I think at this point that we're, 2 years in, 2+ years in, good Lord, that our boards and commissions have adapted very well. And I think that, especially around attendance, it would be silly to force them back in person.
Councilwoman Freeman? I agree. All right, I think we have agreement. Back to our city clerk, she's raising her hand.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do have a question about the attendance policy. During the pandemic, while we were under the state of emergency, the absences were not being held against the members of the boards. Is that something we will continue, or will we revert back to our former attendance policies of like 50% or 80% attendance, depending on the board?
If you could just clarify for me, since this is before our time and for the new council members, what were those attendance policies related to, that mean that you could not reapply, or what was it? You were keeping track of it for what reason, and then how did you use it?
Right. We track attendance constantly. There are different percentages according to the boards. We have the typical requirement is 50% attendance for the year or for the half year. We do have some boards that require 80%, but during the pandemic, there was a regulation saying that we weren't going to be considering absenteeisms. And so I just wondered if we are reverting back to what's been written or stated in the bylaws for the various boards.
Is there anyone opposed to reverting back as to the attendance policy, or do you have any reasons to? Everybody's okay with reverting back to the prior attendance policy?
Yeah, I just want to follow up. This is another thing that I'd like to add to the standardization, because I think 50% is probably too low, and we probably do need to make a higher requirement. I'm not saying anything very close to 80% either. So as we have that conversation around the standardization of bylaws for boards and commissions, that's something I want to figure out for all boards and commissions.
I think that's fair game to put that in that conversation. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sounds like you had your hand full now, Councilwoman Johnson and Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, a number of things to consider on the procedures. All right. Okay, now we turn to settling our agenda, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, I have for your next meeting for the consent agenda, items 1 through 17 and item 24. For GBA public hearings, items 19 through 22.
All right, is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
So moved, second.
Right, he moved this. I'm telling you, it was moved by Councilman Williams and seconded by Councilwoman Freeman that we settle our agenda. And all those in favor, would you sign by saying aye?
Aye.
All those opposed have the same right. Hearing none. Are there any other items to come before our council today? We have an empty place now.
Well, actually, Madam Mayor, shout out for covering the whole city council, Mary Helen, rather than just leaving after the police report.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so we are adjourning at 3:15 p.m. on August the 18th, 2022. Bull City strong. Be kind and be patient.
All right, Madam Clerk. Have a good one.